Hi, my name's Greg Flowers. As said, I've been trapping for 10 years. I first started off with a Chris Tideman inspired trap, and I probably euthanized, or as Michael mentioned, killed 2,000 birds in the last 10 years. Now, this morning I'm going to talk to Chris Tideman's paper. Chris Tideman and Daryl King. Daryl's actually in the audience here. Very briefly, a paper that, and Daryl can correct me if this is wrong, that was written because of a paper published by Glenn Saunders and Trudy Sharp of the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries in 2004. And this paper stated that exhaust gas from idling internal combustion engine is not an acceptable euthanasia agent, as adequate CO concentrations cannot be achieved, particularly with modern car engines. And exhaust contaminants such as hydrocarbons, ozones, nitrogen dioxide and nitric oxides cause severe irritation before death. Exhaust gases may also be unacceptably hot. Now, I've been euthanizing birds with a car that was built around the time that was written, and I haven't had any problems. So, euthanasia, this is what we want: a good death. We don't want to cause birds suffering. We want it to be fairly quick. And these were the questions that Chris looked at and Daryl looked at. Can we do it? So we've just got some different cages that these birds were euthanized in, and here's a little bit of a chart of what Chris found when he conducted the test. You see the one falls, that's the first fall. N falls, which was the last bird to fall, is the N fall. So, and we've got a midpoint, but you can see that with carbon dioxide in a magnet, a medium sized container, a midpoint of 67.
The M and the S represents Mynas and Starlings.
Oh, sorry. All right. Oh, yes, yeah. All right. These were the different euthanasia machines we've got. We had a big one there. This is a little 3.5 horsepower motor. These were all used. This is carbon monoxide. You can see a small car with a small PG cage. The first bird falls off the perch at 7 seconds. The last bird falls at 11. We've got different motors used there. We've got different size cages. You can see that there's a last fall with a ride-on mower and a large cage of 180 seconds, which is probably a little bit longer than we actually want. So carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide both produce a quick, humane death. Chris and Daryl did some serious analysis of the video footage they took when they did this, and they did it slow motion, and they examined head shaking and gasping, and the conclusions they reached were that CO2 led to more gasping and head shaking, and that's a normal response with CO2 that the animals usually feel short of breath and start to gasp, whereas the carbon monoxide actually bonds to the hemoglobin, and it's fairly quick. It's got an affinity to bond 250 times greater than that of oxygen. So it's a fairly efficient, and the birds just lose consciousness. You can see that there's some... I think the important message to get out to people is what you see there on the bottom, that a car exhaust can be used safely. It can be used effectively. I think our numbers now are up to something like 45,500 birds euthanased in the Canberra region through CIMAG. You'll probably find that there's less than 500 of those taken to the RSPCA. Now, that's an indication that there are people out there that do it, and most of those will do it with car exhaust. There's people that will willingly do this. They don't do it for pleasure or whatever, and they want to do it humanely and safely. If we're going to facilitate that, what we've got to do is tell them that the no-nos are 4-stroke motors only, no diesel, no 2-stroke, car exhaust. The first 60 seconds from a cold start. Now, in Daryl and Chris's paper, there's a and I've got some copies here, but it's also available on our website. There's an exhaust emission analysis, and modern cars, now, once again, this paper is probably dated, so it's a few years old, but the exhaust emission starts out at 6% and doesn't get down to less than 1% until about 60 seconds after the car's turned on. A modern car idling has turned out litres and litres and litres of exhaust gas at that stage. So you've got more than enough gas to humanely euthanase the birds. So if people realise this, the first 60 seconds from a cold start, a long hose to overcome the issue with the fumes burning the birds, and other options which we might have to look into as cars become more and more refined. We might need water bath, but at the moment, most of the cars running around on the road in that first 60 seconds offer a safe, humane way to euthanize the birds. Now, we're not in this business to get pleasure out of killing the birds. It's all about doing our utmost to provide that humane death. And I think rather than focusing on the irrational sort of side of this, let's look at it objectively. I've got a quote here that I found on the net, which talks about carbon monoxide. It's off one of the more radical groups perhaps, but carbon monoxide poisoning causes animals to suffer horribly while they are slowly suffocated. They often scream and go into convulsions while struggling for air. This is on an official website. I think that we've got to look at this objectively and scientifically. And so, yes, I'll leave it at that. I would argue that that is a humane way of euthanising animals.
Okay, we've got time for one question.
You say that they're dropping off and they're dead. What proof of death are you guys doing? You know the birds are comatose and they're not moving, but has there been research done in terms of listening to heart or eyeball response rate to check that they're actually dead?
Look, I've got some videos that continue on for another couple of minutes, and there's absolutely no movement. No, I don't do an autopsy or anything like that.
I'm not worried about an autopsy. The point of death when the heart stops beating is the issue.
Yes. Now, these were done in a 44. I covered that. I turned the motor off. I usually walk away. I've shown that video to indicate the time span that it takes for the birds to lose consciousness. When you see them falling over, and I'm sort of referring to Chris and Daryl's interpretation of what's happening, because this is what the terms they use, that they lose consciousness first, and I think this happens with carbon monoxide. But I've continued that video going for another few minutes, and there's absolutely no movement. I then take the covers off, fresh air comes in, there's absolutely no movement. So
you're not actually doing anything to verify death other than observation?
Other than observation, yeah.
Just to add to that, I worked with Chris Tideman on this research. We compared the behaviour of euthanized birds with carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and while we didn't collect any detailed pathological information, we compared the behaviour of birds, and the first table I think that Greg put up illustrated the time for the first bird to drop using both carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide roughly equivalent. Similarly, the time till the last bird falls to the bottom of the cage is also roughly equivalent with both methods, and the time to last movement, which we took to equate to death, although we didn't take heart rates and the like, was very similar for both gases. The only substantive difference between the two was the behaviour of the birds before the last movement, and as Greg mentioned, that included gaping and rapid head movement with carbon dioxide, but not with carbon monoxide.
I think from the earlier presentations that were given, there was examples of the distress calls that were given when the birds are caught in a cage, or if you approach the cage. There was no distress calls given in that. I think in comparison to the examples where you take it to the RSPCA, where they enforce either injection by barbiturate or the organisations that use a cervical dislocation, you've got the whole cage there. Every other bird in the cage is going to be distressed as you're trying to catch one at a time out of the cage. That takes more than 20 minutes maybe to catch that many birds in the cage.
Oh yes, that would.
And there's going to be exactly. And so I don't like to draw comparisons, but just the fact of that example, as opposed to individually catching one at a time, as you said, the amount of travel and the exposure, I guess, to the other birds being taken out one at a time as well, and you had stress from there. Thanks.
Yeah, look, that's true. And it's interesting. I think the public are becoming much more aware of this. I went for a haircut yesterday to look presentable, and I was chatting to the barber and saying, I had this conference, and as soon as I brought up the fact that I was talking about euthanasia, he said, cold car exhaust. He had no interest in trapping miners, but I don't know whether he's got some difficult clients or... But anyway, it's getting out there, and I think that's what we've got to be one of our aims.